Hey, this is Peter. Just going to do a quick run through of our Harpoon scenario. We're doing the Harpoon 5 Jumpstart. We're using the Discord server. We have Harpoon 5 channel set up. I also had previously had a red and blue channel set up, but subsequently had gotten rid of those as we kind of merged into a removing the blinders. So before we had, up to the point of detection, we had two rooms that we were using to get to the point of at least agreeing to remove the blinders. Especially for the Jumpstart, we just wanted to learn how it all worked and how it worked together with Discord and so forth and Simplot. So one of the first things I'm going to do is bring up Simplot 2 and let's go through the whole scenario. I'm going to let it run through like twice, and then I'll do a step-by-step run through and explain what happened as Harpoons approached the Rosvit and the iceberg, as well as when the P-120s approached and eventually struck the Doyle right near the end of the scenario, where we kind of called the scenario. So I'll show you where we got and what we did. Let me start my start Simplot here. Open up the full scenario file. It's the end of the match here. Okay, let's look at where we're at. Alright, this is the way it ended up, but let's run through it a couple times. Alright, so here we go. The Seahawk had taken off, went directly west, then a north path, and right here the Seahawk started to keep itself at least 11 nautical miles, at least 10 nautical miles, and then it got out of the way of the inbound Harpoons, and then there goes the P-120s, and I'll explain what happened here in a minute. We're going to run through this a few times. Boom, boom, boom. That's the whole scenario. Let's do it one more time, and then I'll slow step by step, explain what's going on, explain why Rosviet is still standing and the iceberg was hit, and so forth. Alright, so let's do that one more time. I'll go all the way through. Seahawk takes off. Flies north. At this point, the Doyle has fired its salvo of harpoons. It was originally targeted at the Rosviet, but it does divert to the iceberg and takes it out, actually. And I'll explain that here in a little bit. There's two salvos of P-120s. Boom, boom, boom. Many of these Soviet anti-surface missiles were either hit by SAMs or taken out by the Phalanx, the M13 of the Doyle. And excuse me for saying the Doyle. Let's go step by step, and then I'm going to show you a few shots from our Discord channel. I'll show you a little bit more about the what was going on here. Let's go back and go step by step. Okay. Alright, let's go forward. Alright, so here we go. The Soviets are going about 24 knots. The NATO, the US forces, are going 8 knots at 180 degrees true. again, still continuing. At this point, we went from intermediate. As soon as they had contacts, we had switched over to intermediate turns. Excuse me, tactical turns for 3 minutes each. The Seahawk had taken off. At this point, I believe they might not have seen it yet. The Seahawk eventually, everybody here has monolith pings from the Soviets. The U.S. ships had not turned on their active radars at this point. There will be a point where the Seahawk does, the Pirate 1 Seahawk does turn its active radar on, and then eventually keeps it on, and it relays that information to the Doyle, which helps it slightly in its acquisition. That's really honestly, that is the reason why the Doyle ends up getting its Harpoon salvo off just slightly ahead. So let's go through this real slowly. So the Harpoons are coming in, inbound, and then we get to the detection range, which is around here. And as soon as they detect it, they're like, okay, oh boy. So they send off two salvos of 6 missiles each. These are P-120 anti-surface missiles. So you got 6 missiles coming from the Iceberg, 6 missiles coming from the Ostfjord, and they're targeting the Doyle, which is at this point the only contact they have. What was really interesting about this is that the Doyle stayed at a roughly right around the evaporative duct range of the Soviets' pocket cruisers or missile cruiser range. It was interesting, and they weren't able to get an active radar or a contact even of Biddle. So this was the mostly or primarily crippled U.S. ship, and possibly could have been an easier kill, right? So at this point, the Harpoons are still inbound, and the P-120s have just launched. And this gets interesting here, because what happens is the Harpoon actually had a good on-target rating for its fire control system, right? But what happened is the U.S. captain for the Doyle had rolled a 10, and it was not able to seek the Rosviet. But what happened, if we look in our Discord channel, what ended up happening was that the Seeker has a 45-degree arc, right? So as it moved forward, it was able to pick up on, as it moves forward, it's able to pick up on any valid target within the arc. And what it also, the Doyle's captain had rolled a shift of left, to port of 5 degrees. So what ended up happening is this cone shifted left 5 degrees, which is, I think, present here. And then the range of the Seeker is 20. So as it was moving like this, eventually the Iceberg became a valid target, and it went for it. So then what happened was the Iceberg rolled very, very badly on its defensive rolls for SAMs and close-in Gatling. And what happened was eventually the 4 Harpoons actually got all the way through and killed the Iceberg. And you'll see that happen as we move forward. Boom. The Iceberg is gone. It's sunk. The P-120s are still on the way towards the Doyle at this point, right? The Harpoons have done their damage. P-120s are inbound. Let's see if I can find the Discord images. Oops, excuse me. See if I can find the Discord images. I dropped it, of course. I always do that. Of the ranges that we were using. Bear with me as I scroll through this. Okay, so here's about, this is the detection range of when the Doyle picks up on the P-120s inbound. Eventually, the Doyle has four SAM interceptions, as well as point blank phalanx AA fire on it. Now, it does very reasonably well at blocking those missiles. Of all the missiles that got through, I think eventually three got through from the first salvo and two got through on the second. Ultimately, only one P-120 was on target at the end. So at that point, way down yonder, we start getting into the damage involved. It gets an engineering fire, it gets two other fires, and we're still working on how much damage is still left over. Ultimately, we called the scenario at that point, but let's just finish up the turn replay here. Boom, 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 boom. Uh-oh, Doyle. Boom. It out of all these, none of them hit. Out of all these, eventually one hit the hull. Caused 43 points of initial structural damage. Obviously slowed it down at that point, but what happened after that is they had an engineering fire. What else? A second fire. And I think I can't remember what the other hit was, the other critical. Let me see if I can see that in Discord. Excuse me, I should have. Okay, so I think it got one engineering hit, which caused a fire in engineering. The second critical that it got was a fire critical. Okay, so that was basically a second fire, and then there's another ruling where the first time you get a critical hit, if the warhead causes more than 10 DP, then another fire is caused too. So they ended up with three fires going and an engineering hit. So let's see what else. Reduces speed to next, lower, and we rolled for an electrical load, and it did not have the electrical load issue. Okay. So the Doyle is doing very bad. The Rosviet at this point we called the scenario. The Rosviet had been called back by Soviet Naval Command, and the Biddle and the Doyle eventually just mostly crippled make it to air cover. Effectively, that's the end of the scenario. It's the Jumpstart scenario. It's very very straightforward. Again, let me just replay it again once, just for giggles here. Okay, I'll just play it through. Again, the Seahawk take off. Kind of recoils so that it doesn't get within their SAM ranges. That was very good. In effect, the Seahawk acted as cavalry forward observation, gave them slightly better on target, although they rolled horribly, and then it hit the iceberg instead. Got good rolls, took it out. The Doyle pretty much survived two salvos of 6 P-120s each, eventually only getting hit by one missile, which is actually quite reasonable, quite good. I think the U.S. did as good as they probably could have in the scenario. The Soviets, one of their ships survived intact fully, so it's kind of a margin call here. Tactically, the U.S. wins the scenario, if you will, because they get to air cover, and the Soviets have to strategically withdraw. So that's the scenario. Hopefully you enjoyed this walkthrough. Hopefully it was informative.